Hey kids, this is Mark Arm from Mudhoney.
I'm Kevin Martin from Candlebox.
This is Nicole Alvarez from the world-famous K-Rock.
Hi, I'm Dave Cruzen.
I am Matt Vaughn from Easy Street Records.
This is Richard Stuverud.
Hey, I'm James Joseph from James and the Cold Gun.
This is Jeremy Toback from the band Brad.
And this is the State of Love and Trust.
State of Love and Trust.
State of Love and Trust.
A Pearl Jam podcast.
Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. Feed that algorithm.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the State of Love and Trust. It's a Pearl Jam podcast, and I'm one of your two hosts, Jason Kerepesi, and alongside me, as always, is
Paul Ghiglieri.
Ooh, holding stickers already.
Yeah, throwing them too. Yeah.
Oh my god! If you're new here, this is a long-running gag of Paul's. If you are out there in the world of video, I would be very appreciative if you would go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. If you're on Spotify, like it however you can. I'm not really sure how that works over there, but apparently you can watch them on Spotify now too, so that's very, very cool. If you are listening only, then go ahead and do what, Paul?
They should rate, review, and subscribe on their preferred podcast platform of choice. Feed that algorithm. It's March Madness, baby. Beat it.
Ooh, it is March Madness.
Yeah.
My God. I tell you what, I don't know anything about any of the teams this year, and I'm going to go into that March Madness bracket and then pick my picks and come out of it thinking I'm going to know everything correctly. And then by the end of Thursday, the first Thursday, I'll be like, I'm out.
Yeah, this is just basically like every Pearl Jam prediction that we make over the last 5 years.
UNC Charlotte, who could have seen that coming? I don't know what I said then, but Well, it is March, and we have another fundraiser for you. As I mentioned last week, this month we are helping get funds for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. They fund research to find ways for people suffering with IBD issues, solutions to live better lives, and ultimately they're going to cure both of those diseases. So get out of here, diseases. We don't want you anymore, and you can help with that by donating at least $5, I would say. That gets you stickers and pins from us as a thank you. These little guys, I think Paul's probably got a whole bevy of them still over there he could be chucking for the next 5 minutes. There we go. Yeah. So yeah, $5 or more gets you that sticker and pin pack. And you know what? Just to really dangle a carrot in front of your face to try and get a little more money over there to Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. The person who donates the most money. This.
Look at Ed's face. That's the reaction I would have if I got that in the mail.
That's Ed and the gang on Saturday Night Live in 1992. This is a 45, and it's got both of their performances on it. Here's the proof. Here's them in the, this is the screen cap. If you recall, this is the screen cap of the promo where they were with Sharon Stone. Like, what? Yeah, fun times. Porch and Alive on a 45. Compliments of our friends at Easy Street Records. There you go. This could be yours if you donate the most money to Crohn's and Colitis Foundation here in the month of March. If you want to support the show and help us keep this thing moving on the tracks, 2 ways you can do that. Patreon. We have a great crew over there, a lot of fun times. And the giveaway of the month for patrons is this. It is the Get on My Fucking Face dog leash. I walked my dog today with her own version of this bad boy. By the way, I took her to a daycare today, and I handed the gal the leash, and I was thinking to myself, is she going to read that? I don't know if she did. But anyway, this could be yours if you're a patron in the month of March.
Yep.
The other thing too, Paul, is they could go ahead and go to our official pod shop and buy like a mug or a little pint glassy here or a shirt.
You can't get this though.
No, that's only at Pearl Jam show.
Yeah, exactly.
You've gotten that bad boy. So thank you if you've bought a shirt or a coaster or whatever. It does help us keep doing this show. So if you like what we do, that's one way you could do that, and it has some cool merch to wear or use at. Why am I gesticulating like this?
I don't know what you do.
If you're listening only, thank God right now, basically. All right. We've got a great guest this week. You know, we like to really dive into how music and the Pearl Jam experience at large happens. Right, Paul?
Yep.
That's what we do here.
Well, every time you listen to a record and you flip through those liner notes, there are lots of names in there. And those names come with stories, and those stories help inform the entire process and experience. And we feel, calling is a big word, but we feel the need, I guess, to give voice to those voices, because we think they really color the experience, and they complete the experience, if I'm being honest. So
in this particular case, that is very apt.
Yeah.
You're going to find out why very shortly with our next guest, mastering engineer Ed Brooks. This week's guest has added his expertise to the vast majority of Pearl Jam's non-studio releases since 2000. We're talking bootlegs, we're talking soundtracks, we're talking vault releases, DVDs, and more. And he managed the famed Studio Litho for 20 years, all after flunking out of college. How is that possible? Please welcome the dropout, Ed Brooks.
I like it. The dropout. Yeah, I did. I flunked out.
It's a pleasure to have you on, Ed. And most importantly, it's nice to see somebody went the alternative path and found his calling.
I did. I just dumb belligerent luck, Just I want to do that.
America, dumb belligerent luck. Isn't that the name of the game?
Yeah.
We won't go that way, guys. I swear to you. All right. So Ed Brooks. Now, before we kind of dive into that aforementioned expertise, I have to ask you about your love of the pedal steel guitar. I was kind of rummaging through your Instagram, and it seems that's your musical weapon of choice. Like, when did this happen? How did this happen? Why the pedal steel?
Let's see. It happened about 15 years ago.
Okay.
And it happened twofold. One, I had messed up my hand with really bad bending technique, and I couldn't play. So I started playing lap steel because I didn't have to do anything with my left hand. And being a giant Neil Young fan, I was always hearing Ben Keith, pedal steel. And thanks to Pearl Jam going out one year, had some extra money, bought a pedal steel, and again, was just belligerent enough to sit down and go, I'm going to learn how to play this thing.
Now you got to find yourself involved in the next record somehow. Guys, you need a pedal steel. She a little twang on this one track.
Mike has a pedal steel. We talked about it. I actually was talking to him going, yeah, it's been, I've been able to get it. I've been kind of surprised. And then he told me later, yeah, after talking to you, I got one. And it seems really hard to tune it.
Is it hard to tune?
It is hard to tune. Yes.
Okay.
Well,
so I have no idea where he's at with it, but
for the uninitiated, and for those folks who have not already paused the show via video or audio and Googled you already, you are a mastering engineer, Ed, and which means basically you add the finishing touches, so to speak, to music after it's been recorded and mixed. Now, earlier in your career, you also engineered and mixed records. Hammerbox and REM come to mind. For those less musically fluent, I guess, could you briefly explain how roles differ and what specifically mastering does to the music?
Mastering is the last step. It's the last step, and it's kind of the bridge between production and used to always just be manufacturing, but now it's release into the streaming world. So we have a certain amount of flexibility and tools to kind of sweeten and enhance stuff, clean stuff up, and then we do a lot of somewhat boring work, which is assembling all the different kind of file formats that need to be released for various projects and stuff, so on. It is also a very subtle, deep listen kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Trade?
It's a niche, a niche skill. Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, and most other audio engineering, the strokes are broader. Like when I'm in here and I go, I've added half a dB at 19K, which is a very small adjustment at a very high frequency, and people go, that made a difference. That's so crazy. Where in a little more conventional recording type of setup, you would be adding more gain than that, and in more lower frequencies that are more audible. It's just, it's a very different. What's the word I'm looking for?
What whales communicate via frequency, and we are from mammal to mammal, Ed. It's
mammal to mammal.
Well, what is
that's what I'm looking
discipline.
for. It's just a very different discipline.
Yeah.
Well, then what's something that the engineer team and the mixing team, I guess probably the mixer last, what's something that they are gonna not do and let you handle?
The biggest thing is about 25 years ago, 30 years ago, as digital audio came online, some software designers designed a piece of software called the digital peak limiter. And the way that works is it sets like the top level that any sort of peaks in your digital audio can go past. And it just hits it. It just clamps it down.
So it's the catalytic converter of digitizing music. Is that what this is?
Could be, huh?
Yeah.
And so as you increase the gain towards that, all of sort of the middle parts of the music come up as all the peaks are reduced.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of finesse to get music as loud as we're used to it now, from the sort of the average to the peak. And that's the usual thing that we really ask people not to do. I mean, I do have some mixers who use it, and I'm doing less work on their stuff and finessing it in different ways. But
because you want to have handles, right?
Major one. Yep.
You want to have a little bit of fat so you have wiggle room. Because otherwise, if it's all just peaked out, you can't do anything, right? And
then you get to something that should be louder, and there's none more louder.
So let's talk about. I actually had this question is for later, but like it totally works for what we're talking about here. You know, everyone knows the loudness wars, I think, right? In the late 90s, early 2000s. And then you had streaming.
2025. Yeah.
It's like, it's probably still going to a degree. And now it feels like, well, it's funny, actually, you have streaming that came into play, a handful of years ago. And now you have the resurgence of vinyl. Yeah. So like, do these fluctuations in the industry and how listeners consume the music, does that affect how you approach this?
Yeah, for sure. And artist feedback, and paying attention to what everybody else is doing. And stuff is being mastered as loud now as it was in the height of the loudness wars, and pretty much straight across the board. And I also kind of feel like we've been listening to music that's been, this loud for so long that it's just really normal sounding now. I mean, it's really unusual to go back and hear something that wasn't processed that way. And it's usually really older vinyl, because even modern vinyl has been processed more heavily than it was 40 years ago. So if you pick up a record from the 70s, 80s, it's going to have a different tone than a modern record, just from how tight the dynamics are.
Interesting. Well, let's not go back to the 70s and 80s. Let's go mid 90s here. So you engineer Pearl Jam's cover. Yeah, we'll go mid 90s to start. You engineer Pearl Jam's cover of Leaving here back in the mid 90s, but you mixed it as well, right? You mixed that as well. So I mean, obviously that was a tumultuous time for the band. However, they always seem ready to support a worthy cause. So what do you recall about that experience?
Oh my God, that was like the first time that I worked with the band, and Studio Litho had been halfway built. It was not done. We were waiting for a mixing console, and the band wanted to do demos and rehearse with Neil before, I think they went to Europe that year. And so I basically hobbled a studio together, like rented, borrowed preamps and anything I could find, and actually borrowed from Mackie a very cheap Mackie mixer, which was total budget mixer. And that was like the main playback mixer for the session. Cause
Wow.
all I thought we were going to do was do some demos and a rehearsal. And I don't know, after 3 or 4 days, it was like, oh, we're going to do this Who song, Leaving Here. And we're going to do it live. And so they played the song live with monitors, no headphones. I don't know, 2, 3 takes. They picked one. I think we did an edit for the end, maybe from another take. Then we did set up headphones. Everybody went out and sang the choruses. And then I think the next day, Ed says, okay, well, let's mix that. And I'm like, okay, this is a really crummy sounding console. And if I use EQ, it's going to sound like shit. And he's like, okay. And set up the mix. And he just looked at me and goes, can the vocal be a little brighter? And I'm like, yeah. And that was basically it.
I can't believe you're able to mix that. I mean, I can't imagine the bleed for the monitors. And
I think that helped.
Oh, really?
Well, I think it helped because I think that like the whole thing has like this kind of mashed together that made it sound really cool, and nothing was clean, and everything was in everything. Yeah.
There's some romance to that, I think.
Yeah.
It was the first time I'd ever done it, but I also wasn't going to like be bashful or go, hey, maybe we could do this a little cleaner. It was like, no, just go with what's going on and catch it. And then I don't know, that ended up on Lost Dogs and it didn't get remixed. That was cool. Brett was like, yeah, I liked it. I decided to leave that one. Yeah.
That's neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive a little bit more into some of that Pearl Jam work. We mentioned a lot of your work with them at the top of the show. And we know that you've worked with friend of the show, Brett Eliason, many times. You know him well. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was he your reference point with these guys to begin working with them?
Yep. Well,
how did that happen?
Actually, the first reference point was the original manager of Studio Litho. That was Jim Haviland, who Jim worked at Studio X, which was a room that I worked at too. And that's how Jim met Stone, which led to setting up Studio Litho. Brett, I had met in the late 80s, basically working at the predecessor to Studio X. The studio changed names a few times. And we just got along great because we both were, good young engineers. We totally worked in different genres, so we weren't really competing. And so, yeah, we loved working across the hall from him. So, it fast forward to 2000 and, he got back from the US tour and was going to, mix, I don't know how many shows there were in that, 40 something.
Of the binaural show era?
Yeah, the binaural bootlegs.
72
total that year, right? Yeah. And the European stuff they did, and it didn't get mastered, and it was released unmastered, and he was like bummed. Oh. And so he's like, I want to master the US stuff. And so he reached out and he's like, you want to do it? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And so that year did 40 some US shows, and
wow,
it was a mind blower when it all came out on the same day. And
when did you get asked to do that? Like, was this after the European leg ended in end of June, or was this after the fact, or when did you get?
I think it was probably right towards the end of the US leg, because he came back
of the first. Oh, I see. Okay.
Because it was Europe and then US.
Yeah. Yep.
He came back and he had 40 some shows to mix, and so, and I have no feel at all for what season that was or any of it. I just started working on them as fast as they came, and was, and there was like, these are supposed to be raw, do them fast, no messing around, no stopping for a song. You just hit it and go. So,
well, the way fans received these was a little different too, right? So, I mean, in the year 2000, as most of our audience will know, I mean, that bootleg series, that was the the time where I guess there's a key difference between that tour, the 2003 Riot Act tour, in the sense that as a fan, you could download the unmastered MP3 a day or two after the show and then receive that mastered CD like a week later or something, unlike 3 years prior, where all those bootlegs were made more or less well after the tour had concluded. So when you think back to your process, like what about the process needed to be altered to accommodate that drastic deadline change?
2003 was crazy because 2003, the internet was still really slow. I mean, it was DSL. And so first up, we had to have two, and I remember they were called T1 lines. And I actually tried to look it up the other night to go, what was that? How fast was that? I have no idea. And then the band partnered with this company called Whamnet that had like these secure servers. And I don't know how the network worked, but Brett and John would sit out in the truck. Brett would do a live mix of the show. John would somehow get to some place that had a Whamnet server and upload it to us. We would walk in the next morning, and believe it or not, every time it was there. And the first thing I had to do was figure out the side break for the CDs so that they could start printing the stickers that were going to go on that, and then would master the show. And as soon as I was done with the first disc, Rick Fisher, who was the owner of the studio at that time, would burn a copy of the CD and listen to the CD while I'm mastering the second disc. He gets the second disc, he listens to the whole second disc, and then once all of that's good, and I don't know, I think we must have been making a DDP format at that time, then he would upload the DDP format directly to Sony in Terre Haute, and it would get there that late that day.
Would you feed them, forgive my ignorance of what a DDP is, but like what's the quality level they were talking about?
CD. So 44.116.
Is that like ALAC or FLAC or whatever? Am I just same thing?
It's higher res than that.
Higher than that. Holy.
It's like a WAV file being on steroids or something.
It was basically a WAV file. I mean, that's just like it's a CD master format that now is pretty common for delivery, and definitely in the 2000s, 2010s, we delivered a lot of stuff like that.
Now, so as you're listening back to these things, I feel like you mentioned somewhere along the way that band members would have notes for you on some of this stuff. What are some of the notes that band members would give? If you can divulge that.
It was funny. There actually wasn't much. I mean, Stone said to me once that he loves when the band all kind of blurred together. Like he thought that was kind of the most powerful way to present it. Like he didn't want it too clean. I think once I got feedback from Jeff about, can it be louder? Which was just like, okay, just
2000 was softer than 2003.
It definitely was.
Yeah. Especially those Japan boots.
I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, I was in the year 2000, I had only been a mastering engineer for like probably almost barely a year.
Wow.
So I was just learning, and the gear was different in 2000. We upgraded the studio quite a bit for 2003.
In anticipation of the amount of workload and coming over.
Yeah.
Because, they weren't going to do it the same way as they did it in 2000.
Yeah. And in those 3 years, I had become a mastering engineer. I had learned the subtlety of how to get more gain without just, crushing the stuff beyond any realms of music. So
now there's obviously been this evolution of instrumentation and musicians on stage since 2000, right?
Yeah.
Including Boom on the keys in 2002, and you got Josh Klinghoffer on pretty much on everything since 2021. You got Jeff's 4, 8, and 12 strings and stand-up basses, Ed's pump organ, the synths, even a mellotron at some point. Does every instrument have like its own channel, or do you need to adjust it like as if similar instruments are summed to one channel, like all of Jeff's basses?
So what I get is just the stereo mix. That question is like a good one for. Yes.
Oh, I didn't realize you got a stereo mix.
Yeah, that's all I get. So Brett's the person who can kind of break that down for you. I get a stereo
maybe it's super
mix.
ignorant of us, but like I always assumed that it was sweetening the whole pot, not the output of the mix. I'm sorry, internet. I thought that was the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
So that's why you got to be extra careful when you're talking about a half a dB at a certain frequency. You're doing much more than just one instrument.
I mean, the whole thing. Yeah, everything in mastering, you're listening for the whole thing because every adjustment affects what you're wanting to adjust, but also maybe what you're not wanting to adjust. So you took a while to learn to listen to the things I didn't think I was affecting.
An interesting nugget from an article kind of detailing some of those early bootleg workflows was that you mentioned Rick Fisher, RFI, CD mastering, that you guys upgraded the gear there for the internet. You got the internet speeds and to accommodate kind of Brett FTPing the concert files over, as you mentioned, and you guys send them over to Sony. You said you guys upgraded to a whole 3 megabits per second, which is like molasses compared to now. And you said the whole show from top to tail was a 7-hour endeavor. How long is the process now?
How long is the process now? It's probably not much less than that.
Really?
I mean, if that 7 hours included the upload and download,
yeah.
Okay, it's less than that now for sure. But from when Rachel or I walk in and start a show to we deliver the show, which basically is put it on our FTPs with all of the various parts that Nugs and SiriusXM want, it's 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, because now you have multiple formats you got to give them, right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of a lot of it too, or?
That's part of like the moving files, but it's also, one person masters the show. Another person listens to the mastered show, basically in the CD format or something like that. So the show gets listened to twice before it gets uploaded. And occasionally we catch something that maybe got past the first person and we might have to go back and adjust something, and sometimes it's as simple as like I typed the title wrong and that sends us back to, okay, we need to create a whole new set of files, which means we've rendered it out again, which means we need to listen to it again.
Hand a slight. Damn it.
Hey, I was thinking about it. Nothing Man's probably a tricky one. That one I'm sure has gone through a couple of times as 2 words and then gone, oh, crap.
Yeah. Are there any new wrinkles that like maybe didn't exist in the bootleg process 2.5 decades ago?
Not really. I mean, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me is 2008, 2009, the shows started getting a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a long stretch where we were doing regularly 3 discs worth.
Yeah.
And we were working hard. We were doing 2 shows a day at that point in time. So,
oh man,
those days were long. Like I would get here and just as fast as I could get my setup.
Would you be like, for example, State College 03? Every other show in that tour is like, 210. And State College is notorious for being the longest at that point in their career. It was like 3 hours and 10 minutes, something like that. Do you you get the files in the morning, get your cup of coffee, and you're like, son of a basketball, what is this?
Yeah.
Oh, Satan's been cool. But no.
I always look for the set list on Instagram, and that's always what I want to know is like on stage, off stage. How long's the show? And then it's like, oh, is there any cool songs?
Third encore.
So State College, what city was that?
State College. It was where Penn State football, or Penn State University is. So that would have been April or May of 2003. Yeah,
I sort of felt like, I have a memory of that leg, I believe. Like they played probably in North Carolina in that leg. Is that true? You guys are going to know better
Charlotte?
than me.
Yeah.
I kind of remember that leg being really, really good. Like kind of the peak for
Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, Raleigh, St. Louis, Cleveland.
Yeah.
State College was I can't find it. I don't know. Someone's gonna yell at me. Whatever. It's fine.
Hey.
Anyway. Speaking of record breaks then, how do you do that now when you've got multiple formats? Because like obviously it doesn't matter for MP3 and stream and like that kind of thing, but you've got to do it for the CD because people still like
we
the
have
CDs.
to do it for the CD, and basically that's still the guide for everything. So every one of them's got a fade out at the end of disc 1 and a fade in at the beginning of disc 2.
So what do you do when some of these things get released on vinyl after the fact, like these vault shows, for example, that may have already existed in a different format? You got to go back and re-break them?
Yes. And vault shows, some of them got, probably some edits between songs. Some of the talking probably gets cut out to get it to fit on a side comfortably and sound good. So yeah, those would get edited up some. So we would be producing 2 different master versions of that show.
Where do you split that off? Do you go through the whole CD mix and then make a copy, open that up as another window kind of thing, and then unbreak and re-break?
No. So when Brett sends me a mix, it's stereo, and it is the entire show
as one thing.
It's one file.
So you cut it up.
I cut it up, but mostly the computer cuts it up. So what happens is I'll look at it and go, okay, the show is 135 minutes long. Okay, so where am I going to break this for CD? It's going to be somewhere in that 70-minute zone. So then it's like, pretty quickly you can kind of look at it and go, okay, let's check out what song this is. This looks like a nice clean break. Ed doesn't talk. I can fade out. I can fade in. That's like best case. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes
he's going on some 15-minute tangent in between.
So you got to cut it early. You got to break it early, right? Maybe a song earlier than you would want to.
The thing is, and it happens more frequently now, just by the way that he paces the shows. He'll introduce a song that is the song that needs to be the first song on the CD. So some of the shows start with him talking, leading into an introduction, and then the song starts. Where in my favorite, the way I would like to do it is to have every CD start with audience comes up and a song drops in, put it on and hit play and it happens.
I always wondered about that because I feel like there are some recordings out there. They're probably audience ones, or I don't know. There's some bootlegs of other bands too, where the track actually starts with crowd noise or talking, and it's like, well, put that at the end of the previous file, right? You want the song to begin the thing, right?
Yeah, but sometimes, they'll be talking and the hi-hat count will start.
Oh.
And we always keep the count.
You got to keep it
with the song. So there are times when it's Mike or Stone are feeding back or having some noodling. And to me, it sounds better if you're going to search for that song, if it doesn't drop in the middle of a screeching guitar. If you actually hear the ramp up to whatever happens and then the song starts. I don't know. That's kind of probably old school of me, kind of wanting it to not just be last.
Well, you've not only mastered, you've remastered records as well. I mean, most notably for our listeners anyway, the complete works of Love Bone, Brad's debut, Shame, Sean Smith's compilation, Shield of Thorns, pardon me. What is that workflow like when it comes to remastering? Do you need to strip back anything before you get started?
Honestly, it's the exact same process. Mm-hmm. The thing about remasters to me is like I always want to make sure that I do justice and honor the fans of the record. Okay. Like I never want to like make the record not sound as cool. I've heard some remasters that were so heavy-handed that I couldn't listen to them. I've heard some remasters of artists that sound beautiful, and I'm just like, this is great. And I just always wanted to make sure that I made them sound great for the people who dug it, because that's who's going to go buy those records.
So what does heavy-handed sound like then to you?
Heavy-handed usually sounds like loud for loud's sake.
Okay.
Less dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of don't know how to describe it much better than that. Or it's like overly EQ'd, like it's much brighter than it originally was, or the balances don't sound right.
Are there like maybe like some newer gear or plug-in stuff that allows you to noise gate stuff that there's this room hiss that like, oh yeah, that's like cool, I guess, but like if I could get rid of that, it would sound better. Like, is there anything like that you've gotten over the years to make this process even crisper for certain records that are
yeah. There's definitely software that's good for noise removal. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it doesn't sound good. It's kind of a crapshoot.
Are you ever using AI in your process?
No.
Do you foresee a time where you think you will? I'm just curious because it's such a pervasive entity that seems to be everywhere all the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think there's been like subtle versions of it in some of the software that's come out in the last 10 years.
Okay.
But I haven't heard anything like in any of those softwares that to me sounded great. Sounds useful and convenient and can make something happen faster, but
I just
this point,
I think to myself, like even with proper prompting, I could not imagine how AI could ever replicate what you do. Like, how do you replicate someone who has like the amount of like there's a connection that you form with listening to these songs over a span of so many years, and not just the songs, but like the impact that it has on the crowd that's there, and how do you help the listener who was there recreate that experience? AI doesn't have that. There's that human component that's not there, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not. And I mean, I know there is an emotional part of this that both Rachel and I put into it because we both love the band. We know that we're doing this because people want to hear it. It means a lot to, the fans, and the way the band treats the fans is, I don't know. I've always just been thrilled to be a part of it. And,
has there been a, like maybe not so much with Pearl Jam, but an edict or when it comes to mastering stuff or even remastering stuff, what do these bands and what are these entities and labels, what do they want out of this? And is it dependent on the genre? Like, does a pop song, I want it to be like super limited, versus Shame. Yeah. Shame sounds super organic.
Yeah. I think that everybody in the chain of the production of music kind of understands where a certain genre, style, or song should go and who is going to listen to it. And so, I think some people are very specialist at certain styles and genres. As a mastering engineer, we're less specialized about genre and more specialized about the medium and what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But is there? I don't think there's an edict other than like if the client likes it and the artist is happy, it's good.
And part of that is fluency, right? Like you told Matt Boudreau on the Working Class Audio podcast that you maintain your fluency on the tech side of things, even though you moved on to be an engineer. So, I mean, that must have come in handy when you were considered to run Studio Litho in 2000, right? Could you talk? Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about that, like how you got that gig?
I got that gig because the original manager was a friend of mine, and he and his family were going to move to Cleveland, and he just basically goes, "Do you want to be the manager?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, I'll tell Stone."
Fluency be damned.
And suddenly I was the manager.
Man, it's that easy, huh? You just got another guy.
I just, it was so weird.
Isn't that every industry though? It's who you know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Nepotism.
I think it's fantastic. But I'm curious though, like just in terms of the way that you really took a lot of pride in maintaining that fluency on the tech side of things. Like, how did that impact that transition for you into this new gig?
It's sort of like, back in the day when you could work on your car, there's a certain amount of like, oh, I can take care of this. I can fix this. This isn't over my tech level.
Yeah.
It saves money. It also just like takes less anxiety. It takes anxiety out of like going, oh God, how are we going to get this fixed? And that type of stuff. I mean, there's definitely stuff that I cannot fix. I'm not particularly proficient with computer networking, but some of the older pieces of gear in here I've managed to repair and hopefully will be able to continue to maintain.
Part of it's people management too, right? I mean, in the sense that you can, folks.
Was for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. I mean, I know when I transitioned from teacher to administrator, continued to do some teaching in little pockets on the side, just because I wanted to continue to like feel that, and it wasn't so much that I had an itch to scratch as much as it was I want to know what it is like to go through teaching now versus what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, so that way I can connect and properly support the folks who are doing it now. And so if you're maintaining that tech fluency and you're working with people, it's a personnel thing where you want to be able to support those people in being successful with their jobs. But if you're completely out of touch with that process on their end, it could be challenging, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is like Stone really he just encouraged us to like be creative and make a space too that was like that we wanted to be working in. So it was like
that's cool.
A lot of what we developed and changed and either copied or came up with our own ideas was all based in the fact that we were totally supported to like make a very cool studio that could either handle big major label type bands or be a service to the Seattle music community, which for him, that was a super important piece of what Studio Litho is about.
Do you have any uniquely fond memories? Maybe bands coming in that was a great time?
You know what? I was thinking about this today, and like my favorite memory at Studio Litho was actually with Stone, and the original configuration of the studio was the room was one big room with a very small booth, and it worked great for like the recording we'll even hear, where it's like everybody in the room raging loud, and the room's weakness was that there wasn't any isolation booth of any size. So, and I won't be able to remember what year this was, but I was standing with him out in the studio. I don't know what we were talking about, just stuff. And then he looks at me and he goes, if you build me a booth I'll book the studio for a year. And then he walked away to go like make some coffee. And I'm like, did he just tell me to build a booth? I think that's what just happened. So that was a really fun time. Like we modified the studio completely. We rewired it because we had to take the place apart. And I kind of did a little bit of architectural work to like design the booth, and the booth turned out really cool. And the studio is much more flexible now, but it really like you build me a booth and I'll book the studio for a year.
He Field of Dreams to you. If you build it, they will come.
If you build it, yeah, I'll hang out here.
Was that like, were you licking your chops when he said that? Because like, I know you had this tech background, and you kind of built out things a little bit from that side of things, not architecturally, but like, were you like, oh, great, or you're like, oh shit.
I was like, oh shit, wow, what do we got to, how are we going to do this? And first we got to figure out where we're going to put the booth. And yeah, it was a big job.
How long did that take?
I want to guess it took, I don't know, 6 months from that conversation, probably 3 months to design and kind of conceive it. And I think the studio was closed for about 2 months, maybe 3. Quick. Yeah. And we had a gig with Mike, and I can't remember who he was bringing in, but we were like going till like the last day before it was going to be a studio the next day. And yeah, was up all night, but it worked.
Sure did. Ed, you wanted to be a record producer. You've tracked, you've engineered, you've mixed bands. Nowadays, when you're mastering a record, does your mixer or engineer brain step in and say, wouldn't it have been great if they did this here instead?
You know what? No. I mean, it used to now and then, but I think that partly why I'm a mastering engineer was like, this really was when I got to it. This was the discipline that kind of suited me. This was like really kind of what worked for me. And I've been doing it long enough now that I just think about what's in front of me and what can I do to translate it and serve it as best as I can. I mean, yeah, some days I'm like thinking, they shouldn't put that song first. Or, yeah, that outro is kind of too long. But
so it's gotten easier over the years to kind of remove that, like, yeah, I can't be responsible for that. I have to just do my thing.
Do my thing, because this is what a lot of people have worked on this and they've made these decisions, and I'm there to support it. So
over all these years, you have, I mean, hundreds of Pearl Jam shows, right?
Yeah. One time I did count, and I think it was less than 300, but probably close or maybe over.
What would you say then? Because, in 2000, the band chose like 30 shows. Maybe it was less than that. What they called them 8-man. It was like those are the ones that stood out to them as like the cream of the crop performances and energy and the whole shebang. Do you have a handful of 8-man style shows that you worked on? You're like, that one was fucking great.
Well, that's what I was kind of like getting on with that one stretch of the 2003 tour. I mean, I sort of felt like, I feel like the Charlotte show or something like that I thought was really great. And then, I mean, I'm super partial to the Wrigley shows that were Let's Play 2. And I spent a lot of time working on those. And seeing the movie was so awesome. It was just like, oh, okay.
That soundtrack had a whole bunch of stuff that people hadn't heard before. Can you talk about like getting that in and being like, wait, what's this? What is this demo?
The soundtrack for PJ20.
Yeah. Sorry, PJ20. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, so that one was cool. That one was really hard. I mean, some of it was Brett mixed. The track sounded fantastic. Some of it was like just really rough. And probably the stuff that still doesn't sound all that good, I worked the hardest on, for sure, to get them where it was. Like Garden, I can still remember this. Garden from that record was like recorded on some sort of a video recorder. I don't think it was a digital recorder. The level was like you put the audio file in, and I'm going, there's no audio there. There's just a line, and then I like turn the monitors all the way up, and it's like, oh, there's actually something there. And so I had to start building it up in gain just to get it there.
And how do you do that without raising the noise floor?
You don't.
You don't. It just
You
is.
don't. It just comes. There was also a break. There was like a dropout in that one too, that I had to use some software to just sort of schmooze together, where it kind of looked at both sides and you can sort of blur it together so you don't lose the rhythm. But obviously that one I remembered. I worked really hard on that song.
Yeah.
And it's mono and it sounds terrible.
So all
Go
these
ahead,
years
Jason.
later, I was just going to say, you've gone through all these shows, you did these soundtracks, and I know that you wanted to, as you said before, you wanted to be a record producer. You were a tech, and then you were an engineer. And I think you told Matt on that Working Class Audio that you got that offer. They're like, you just want to be a tech, right? And you were like, yeah. And then immediately you're like, nah, I want to be an engineer. So define yourself then in the late 2000s. No, I'm sorry, the late 90s. Things were changing, right? And mastering became the thing that you just kind of had to do to maintain, right?
Yeah.
By necessity in a way?
It was. I mean, I was looking at mastering as I was just trying to diversify. Everything you can do to make a living and be useful. And mastering was like, oh, I'll do this, if I get a couple of days a week, that'd be awesome. And I just, I lucked out.
7 years later, Ed, here we are.
Yeah, I'm still doing it full time. I know. It was like I found my thing. And, some people trusted me to work on records, and some of those records became pretty notable records in the early 2000s. And it was like, oh, this is great. This is happening. And then,
So where do we go from here, Ed?
Where do we go from here? We're going to keep going. I don't know if we talked about this in this podcast, but in 2016, my business partner, Rachel Field, and I bought RFI from Rick Fisher, and then we changed the name to Resonant Mastering, and basically hit the ground running like the next day we were working. And the studio's grown and is busier than it ever was during the RFI days. And, Rachel and I are both doing a lot of work, a lot of really great work. And I mean, I love this. And I knew talking to you guys today that there's been a lot of times when I've sat in here and started a show and gone, there's some Pearl Jam fans who would think this is pretty much the coolest fucking job any human can have. I'm getting paid to listen to this show today, and even tweak it up a little bit. And
you add the pixie dust at the end.
I add the pixie dust. Yep. And take out the feedback if I can. And that's one piece of editing that we do pretty regularly is if there is feedback, we can go in and scrub it out.
Unless Mike McCready did it intentionally, and you keep it in.
Oh, of course. That discussion goes on in here. Do you think that's the guitar? That's not the vocal, right?
Well, I will tell you that the number of people that we have spoken to, and we talked about this a little bit off air before we started, this band has a history of surrounding itself and working with people who are not only excellent
Savants.
at their crafts.
Yeah, savants.
Yes, but they're always really good people. They don't work with anybody who's a dick. They work with people who want to do things for the right reasons. And when I think about your career and keeping that fluency of being a tech and keeping that engineer brain and just kind of building on top of it and doing what needs to be done for the art. And here you are 26, 27 years later as this mastering guy that our audience, like you guys don't realize that Ed's the reason why it's got the pixie dust. So I just want to say that I'm thankful for you for all these years, for putting your pixie dust on there. And it's clear why you have been a part of this Pearl Jam family for so long.
Seconded.
Yeah. I'm proud of it. And I mean, they're such great guys. And I like Stone. I've said this a bunch of times to friends. It's like he's taught me so much about being a good, conscious, citizen of the planet. I mean, he just really given me a lot. Just so many positive lessons from him, and how he wanted to approach how Studio Litho existed, and all of it. So, yeah, I feel really lucky to have been involved with these guys because, well, you guys know.
It was fate, Ed. It was fate.
Right place, right time.
You make your fate by working hard and being a good person. So you found it yourself.
Yeah.
Well, Ed Brooks, mastering savant, as Paul called you, and Resonant Mastering. If you're in the mood to have a record mastered,
yes,
over there, resonantmastering.com. And Ed Brooks, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it, man.
Pleasure having you on.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ed Brooks, for coming on the show and talking about your expertise, your craft, and now that people know how, I mentioned the pixie dust, how it comes, how it happens.
It's that polish. It's that polish. Makes a big difference.
The sheen, the wax. The sheen. Wax on, wax off,
Exactly.
He's the carnauba of the listening experience. Is that right? Carnauba wax, isn't that how it goes?
I could tell you one thing, though. He mentioned, pre-2008, right? It's like it's 05, 06.
Yeah.
There's a discernible difference, I would say, when you listen
When
to
I mentioned the 2000 bootlegs being much quieter, he was like, oh, yeah, yep. Because they were run by the seat of their pants. They were just making it up as they went along. And Tim Bierman's told us that. Brett Eliason's told us that. And now Ed's like, yep. They got it all figured out in 03. Upgraded the Wi-Fi, the whole shebang.
It's like we've talked so many times about how great those boots from 03 sounded. And I've cited those Japan shows so many times. They're just they're pristine. You know what I mean? And now we know the reason why.
That's what we try and do here on the show, guys, is try and stitch together more of these puzzle pieces as to why the things that we listen to, these DVDs, these soundtracks, these live boots, these vault releases, the studio masters, why they sound the way that they sound, what the process was, and who's responsible. Because I think you guys want to know, and I'm very intrigued to know, and I think the conversations are super invaluable.
Yeah, and every one of them deserves a tip of the cap.
Ma'am, sir.
I specifically chose that phrase because you're wearing a hat, so I just
yeah, I went with it. I yes-anded you.
You did.
Yeah, I haven't done improv before, but I know the yes and, ma'am, sir. Anyway, you can yes and into our March fundraiser. Look at that segue.
Well done.
Was that any good? March fundraiser this month. It's the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. I mentioned at the top of the show, a favorite of Mike McCready. And you could go ahead and help those fine folks end all the IBD issues that we have out there. Donate $5 or more for a free sticker and pin pack from us. But the greatest donator, really, oh baby. I mean, we're talking vinyl here. We're talking Pearl Jam on Saturday Night Live. They're doing Porch. They're doing a live on a 45. That rhymed intentionally. From our friends at Easy Street Records. This could be yours.
Hold that up to the camera. Get it nice and close for a second.
Look at Dave's face. What a silly boy. Oh, look at that. Look at Jeff. Edward.
Oh, they're the best.
Is that Mike holding a camera? What is he holding? Mike's holding a camera.
Yeah.
Look at that. Just a wacky bunch of kids, huh? If you are a fan of this show, Patreon is one way to help us stay afloat. And as a thank you to our patrons who we love and are probably in the Discord right now, furiously typing away, we do a giveaway each month. This month, Dog leash. Dog leash, Paul. Paul, you know, I got to tell you, the dog leash is a treat. I mentioned at the top of the show, I used it today.
Don't feed it to your dog. Feed the algorithm, but not the dog.
And listen, I said last week that I don't care how you use this. Just use it. However you want. There's no judgment here.
We're not going there. We're not going
It's a judge-free zone, Paul. Anyways, that could be yours if you're a patron in the month of March 2025. And otherwise, you can head over to our official podcast shop online. Lots of cool stuff over there. Old designs, new designs.
Have at it.
That just helps us stay on the air. That's all we wanted to say about that. So I'm almost out of my beer here. It's an IPA. And I don't know why I told you what kind of beer it was, but
I don't know why you did either. Was
what
it
do you got in that?
Good? Was it
what
delicious?
What do you got in there? What do you got in there?
You know what? Got a little
little verklempt?
Yeah, something going on in there. So I made myself a little tincture. Help me get through the show.
How are your nodes?
Inflamed.
Whatever I can do to push this off the rails as far as possible by the end of the show. Thank you out there for listening and or watching. If you did both, great. That helps the numbers. If you're watching, though, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. That would be super. Tell your friends. Put a little postcard to carrier pigeon. I can't talk. And just send it out there. Let it find somebody. Or if you're more efficient, Paul, what should they do?
Well, they should feed that algorithm with rates, reviews, and subscribes, not with a dog leash.
You can't wait until it's April and I don't have to hold this thing up anymore and make ridiculous comments. Hey, guess what, Paul? Today, this episode...
I don't know why, because you haven't told me yet.
This episode is episode 249.
Oh, boy.
Which is one shy of a round number that people like.
250 shows. We should do something special.
We should. When we think of that, we'll let you guys know.
Yeah, until then, we won't tell.
Oh my God. I love it. Well, come back next week and find out what the hell we figured out for this fabulous anniversary of 250 shows. We thank all of you for making it happen. And come back next week and find out what that is. And until then, you've been listening to or watching
The State of Love and Trust.